Hello Internet, and welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Sean and Stuart for a shallow and probably uninformed dive into the world of mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural. We're here again for more nonsense.
Yeah, I'm melting. Just give us a sec.
We're all melting.
It is Scorchio.
It's horrible.
Yeah. It was cool. I was driving back home last night, and it was like late, like midnight, and I was driving through the storm. That was awesome.
We just had like the wind more than anything else. I didn't see any thunder or lightning, but there's a few trees outside, and at one point one of them literally looked like it was going to fall over.
We're doing small talk now. We've resorted to talking about the weather. Literally the least interesting subject. Let's get on with the episode.
All right, let's talk about something more exciting. How about pirates? Are pirates cool? Do we like pirates?
I wasn't expecting that.
Well, what about sky pirates? Is that even cooler?
Okay. I mean, it sounds like Final Fantasy 12.
It might be Final Fantasy 12
in there. I mean, I've not long played that actually, so I probably know the story that you're about to bring.
Yeah, it's just Star Wars, isn't it? Final Fantasy 12.
Sort of.
I heard it's just literally just copy and paste of Star Wars, but with pretty anime boys.
Isn't it all Final Fantasy?
Yeah. It's X thing, but with anime boys.
Anime boys, yeah.
It's Disney with pretty anime.
Okay, so today's topic is...
Go on.
Today's topic is D.B. Cooper, who is one of the most famous aeroplane hijackers of all time.
Oh.
And hence a sky pirate.
Sky pirate, I like it.
That's cool.
On November 24th, 1971, a middle-aged man carrying a black briefcase purchased a one-way ticket from Portland International Airport to Seattle, Washington. He identified himself as Dan Cooper and boarded Flight 305, a Boeing 727, along with 36 other passengers and 6 crew members. Once on the plane, he settled in his seat at the rear of the cabin. He ordered a drink and lit a cigarette. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper turned and passed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner, who was sat in a jump seat to his left. The handwritten note said, "I have a bomb in my briefcase, and I would like you to sit by me." Schaffner reluctantly sat next to him, and Cooper opened the case for her to see 8 red sticks of dynamite wired to a large battery. After showing Schaffner the bomb, he relayed his demands. He wanted $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes, 2 being primary and 2 being reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane upon landing. He warned, "No funny stuff, or I'll do the job," which is kind of a, like 20s gangster mob.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I hope he had did he twiddle his mustache as he said it?
I imagine he did, but I don't think he's got a mustache, so that's a bit of a fail. But we can all imagine.
Wait, he's a pirate without a mustache, right? I want cancel the podcast.
He's a sky pirate. They're different.
Yeah.
Right, I was muted then. And then I was like, "Oh, did he twiddle his mustache?" And then Stu went, "Oh, did he twiddle his mustache?" So I went, "Oi!"
Yeah, I wondered why you were muted. I thought you knew what Alex was saying.
I was just being quiet. I'm just going to stop. I'm not going to mute
Stole
again.
your joke. I mean, you did steal his joke last episode, so...
Yeah, that is true. It's about time.
It's even now. After this, Schaffner went to tell Cooper's instructions to the cockpit crew, whilst another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, took her place. She used the phone in the rear of the cabin to relay Cooper's message to the rest of the crew for the duration of the hijacking. Whilst the police and airline staff on the ground gathered the items that Cooper requested, the plane flew in circles above Seattle. So as to avoid a panic, passengers were told that there was a minor mechanical issue with the plane and that landing would be delayed. $10,000 $20 bills were collected from the Seattle First National Bank, which contained a ransom package of $250,000 for such an occasion. Cooper rejected the military-issue parachutes offered by McCord Air Force Base, and instead demanded civilian parachutes with manually operated ripcords. The police obtained these from a local skydiving school. Around 5:45 p.m, over 2 hours after its scheduled arrival, Flight 305 finally landed in Seattle. Cooper instructed that the plane be taxied to a remote area of the tarmac, upon which the money and parachutes were delivered. The items were handed to Tina Mucklow via the aft stairs, which is the set of stairs at the back of the plane which sort of flips down. This was done by a manager of the airline company wearing plain clothes, as not to, freak out the hijacker, I guess.
Not to arouse suspicion, I suppose, to the crew members as well. To the passengers, sorry.
Passengers, yeah.
Yeah. Once the delivery was complete, Cooper allowed all of the passengers and 2 of the flight attendants to disembark, leaving Mucklow, the captain, and 2 other members of the crew on the plane. At this point, Cooper outlined the rest of his plan to the remaining crew. He wanted the plane to fly southeast to Mexico City at the lowest airspeed possible without stalling the aircraft. He wanted the plane to fly below 10,000 feet with the landing gear down, the aft staircase deployed, the wing flaps lowered 15 degrees, and the lights in the cabin switched off.
They're very specific demands, aren't they?
Yeah, he seems like he knows what he's doing. He's prepared this.
It sounds like he's trying to fly under radar and with the option to be able to literally jump out at a moment's notice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Or crash land, I suppose. Emergency land, sorry, not crash land.
Yeah.
Well, we're saying it sounds like he's planned it. He's brought a bomb onto a plane.
Yeah, well, it might not be a bomb. It might be a dummy.
Okay. Spoilers.
Well, spoilers, I don't know whether it was a real bomb or not.
Right, okay. Fair enough. That was going to be my first question.
Yeah. The co-pilot informed Cooper that the aircraft wouldn't be able to reach Mexico City in one go, and that they would have to make a stop to refuel. They agreed on Reno in Nevada. Cooper was also told that it was unsafe for the plane to take off with the aft staircase extended, so he allowed the plane to depart with the stairs retracted on the condition that Mucklow stay by his side and show him how to deploy them once they were in the air. At approximately 7:40 p.m, the plane was back in the air, trailed by 2 jet fighters, which had been scrambled from the nearby Air Force base. After takeoff, Cooper told Mucklow to join the rest of the crew in the cockpit and not to disturb him. At 8 p.m, a warning light in the cockpit notified the crew that the aft stairs had been lowered. The plane touched down in Reno Airport at approximately 10:15 p.m. The 727 was quickly surrounded by authorities, who performed an armed search of the aircraft. Cooper was nowhere to be found. There was only one explanation for the hijacker's absence. At some point between Seattle and Reno, Cooper had left from the plane into the night.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
A true American hero, D.B. Cooper.
That is awesome.
/ notorious scoundrel.
Yep. But still, the balls on that guy.
Yep.
Oh, that's mad. So wait, so at the time that the aft stairs had been lowered, where were they in their flight path?
You see,
halfway
that's a problem. That's something they have to figure out, because eventually they have to get a search area figured out to try and find him. So we'll get to it in a bit, but there's a way they figure out where the plane was on the flight path.
That's cool.
I bet it has something to do with speed as distance over time, isn't it?
No, it's time over time.
Well, that would just be 0.
No, it's time travel.
Yeah, but if you divide time by time, apparently.
You go back in time. That's how it works, right?
Also, that you are aware that's a callback to the last episode, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, people need to be listening to these in order. It's a serial podcast, right? You don't understand the in-jokes unless you listen to it in order.
Exactly.
So the manhunt for D.B. Cooper began the moment the FBI determined he was no longer aboard the 727. 3 major pieces of evidence were left on the plane after Cooper escaped: his black clip-on tie, 8 cigarette butts, and 2 of the 4 parachutes. Recent examinations of the tie have noted that certain rare earth elements are present on the tie. Such elements were used in projects of Boeing in the 70s, and so suggest that Cooper may have been an employee there.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it sounds well organised, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Or I saw something as well that they found titanium on it as well, which was like rare at the time. So he may have worked in some sort of lab that dealt with titanium.
Okay.
But it's just a way of like trying to narrow down who the suspects are. The cigarette butts, on the other hand, would be a very useful source of DNA if they hadn't been lost at some point during the investigation.
What, like they were found and then got lost? Or
they were either not picked up, or they were disposed of, or they were bagged and then put in a room somewhere and got lost. But yeah, so we don't have those.
Yeah, like obviously cigarettes on a plane, first of all, the idea of cigarettes on a plane is just baffling. But
yeah.
Well, the idea of bringing a suitcase on the plane without it being checked.
Well, yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah, I forgot about the bomb.
What year was it again?
71.
71?
Oh, yeah. So, like, they were obviously security checks, but it was after, like, 9/11 that, especially in America, that sort of security would really, really be locked down onto.
Yeah,
so,
well, security...
1971, I can imagine no security.
Yeah, after this event, security was bumped up quite a lot. So,
yeah, I'd hope so.
So the next time you're taking your belt off at the airport to put on the
Say next time you take your belt off the airboat, say thanks, DB Cooper.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's the bottom I'm trying to get
to. Yeah, think to yourself, I'm basically a sky pirate at this point. Takes belt off.
Yar, here's my shoes.
I have 101 milliliters of liquid in this bottle.
Yeah.
we just throw this toothpaste away.
I was going to say toothpaste. Yeah, I've got precisely one too many drops of toothpaste.
So, after interviewing the crew and passengers, the FBI produced a profile of Cooper along with several composite sketches. And a lot of these sketches are available online, so you can just sort of Google them if you want to have a look. They described him as a white male with dark hair and brown eyes. He was in his mid-40s, around 5 foot 10 inches tall and 180 pounds. This can be considered reliable, as both flight attendants who had spent the most time with Cooper gave nearly identical descriptions. They were also interviewed in separate locations, as Schaffner was one of the people who was allowed off the plane in Seattle. So there's a lower risk of collusion, funny business, inside job sort of thing happening.
So it's reliable in that respect, but it's not reliable in the fact that they've just described a generic white male.
Yeah, but mid-40s, usually people are younger than that when you think generic white male. They described his clothing as well, and we'll get to that in a bit. The next step was determining an approximate landing zone in order to begin searching. Nor the crew nor the fighter jet pilots behind the plane had seen Cooper exit, so it was difficult to estimate when he had jumped. However, the crew had told the FBI that at around 8:13 PM they felt an oscillation of the aircraft and suspected that this was caused by Cooper's jump. This assumption was supported by a subsequent recreation of the hijacking, in which a similar vibration was created after pushing a weight out of an open air stair. So they kind of copied the conditions and then recreated the results. Based on the flight path and drop time, the landing zone was estimated to be near Lake Merwin, which is a reservoir on the Lewis River in southwest Washington. Authorities searched large areas of the mountainous wilderness on foot and from the air, but no trace of Cooper or his equipment was ever found.
Oh.
That's so bizarre.
Well, so they didn't find... Because a parachute would be quite easy to find, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that, because he...
Unless he did take it with him.
Well, he jumped with 2, didn't he?
He took 2 of the parachutes.
Yeah, so he's jumped with 2 parachutes, presumably one to deploy, one as a failsafe, was probably what he was thinking. But then, even if you find a parachute, the search area must have to have been absolutely enormous. Because think how far you can glide with a parachute. I know he was only what was he, less than 10,000 feet, you said, high, didn't you?
Yes.
So he's not got that much range, I suppose. It's not like dropping from 30,000 feet and then wondering going absolute miles. But 10,000 feet's a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but not when you plummet for most of it.
Yeah, but do you plummet for most of it? If you deploy it early, you can glide for miles.
True.
We're assuming it's late deployment, aren't we? Thinking that you've got quite a specific search area. You might have even aimed for that river.
From what I remember, that you need to have a certain amount of clearance from the plane before you pull it.
I mean, I think that's a safety thing, but this guy didn't seem to be caring about safety very much.
Or knew exactly what he was doing, and therefore didn't have to worry about the standard safety precautions.
Yeah, he was like a skydiving badass.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. So straight away, if someone's got the knowledge on, he could just be thick, but the way that he's planned it doesn't sound like he's thick. He must know what he's doing, so he must have either been given full training with his parachute, with parachutes in general, or has taken the time to actually learn how to do it. Because that would be a big gaping hole in the plan, right?
Yeah, but then the fighter jets that were following in sync, so they presume, when you think about it normally, they're normally flying alongside. The stairwell's going to be at the back, isn't it? But it's presumably going to be on one side. It's not going to literally point out to the rear of the plane, or does it?
The 727 is special in the way the rear stair is. It's right in the middle of the back of the plane. So if you imagine like a container plane and how the whole back of it opens, it's like that, but a little staircase.
Okay.
Right, okay. So maybe the fighter jets wouldn't have reliably seen a specific instance of him jumping out then. That's not unrealistic to think that they're going fairly fast in a straight direction, trying not to crash their really expensive jet fighter whilst worrying about the safety of all the people on board. brief instance of a flash of a person go out. And you said it was the evening, right?
It was night. It was like 8 p.m.
Yeah, so it's dark.
In the autumn.
Yeah, so it's going to be dark. And that
November.
high up, it could be cloudy.
And it was raining as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Like, is that confirmed what he did?
What, jumped out?
Yeah.
Well, how did he disappear?
How else would you explain him not being on the plane?
I'm feeling like that might be a good question. So that's what I'm thinking. So, was there no eyewitnesses on the plane of him jumping out?
No, because
everyone was in the cockpit.
Yeah, everyone went in the cockpit and they locked the door.
All the passengers.
No, they got off. Remember?
Right.
Yeah, he let all the passengers off. Remember, and there was only 6 people left on the plane for the second flight.
So the 6 people, Alex. Sorry, just to remind us. They were pilot, co-pilot. What was her name? McCall. That was it. Who else is on the plane? Who are the other 3? Do we know? Because it's weird that he let Schaefer off, knowing that she knew what he looked like, and then kept other crew members on.
It was the captain of the plane, 2 other members of the crew, and Mucklow. So I assume the 2 members are a co-pilot and, I don't know, someone else.
And we are confirming the people that were left on the plane had nothing to do with it.
They don't seem to have had anything to do with it. They don't have any criminal history or anything like that. They've all been interviewed quite extensively afterwards. At no point have any of them been suspects. And
none of them were, because obviously the money was, it was $250,000 physical, wasn't it?
Yeah, in $20
so
bills.
That's quite a big briefcase.
Yeah, we'll get to it, but it's assumed that So one of the parachutes was all sort of ripped open, and it looked like he tried to make a bag out of it for the money. So they're assuming that the other parachute
that was left on the plane.
Yeah, one parachute left on the plane was sort of like ripped apart. So they're assuming that the second parachute he took with him, he successfully did that. He made like a bag out of the parachute to hold the money. But it was a lot of money, so I'm with you there. It's a little weird how he managed to get it all with him.
And the briefcase wasn't found on the plane, wasn't it?
No, he took the briefcase with him. He took the handwritten note with him. So the only bit of handwriting we've got from him is when he bought his ticket and the original arrival at the airport.
Because it's a bit weird, obviously, if he's cut a parachute up to make a bag for the money, but he's jumped out with the briefcase, why would he make a bag for the money? The money's in the briefcase. The
briefcase had the bomb in it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Got you. I'm getting muddled up here. I was thinking that the briefcase was given to the... Yeah. So he had right, okay, got you. So he had the briefcase, bomb, and a bag full of money that had been given by the manager of the airport company.
Yes.
Didn't he? Got
and
you.
And that was one single bag.
I think it was one single bag.
Okay.
Right. And they're assuming he tied the bag to himself with the parachute.
Yeah, that makes more sense. So I'm thinking now it's more like a hold-all bag, like a gym bag that you get. Like when you think of classic heist movies and someone goes, put the money in the bag, and it's got a zip on it, and it's about 2 foot wide, and it's, you know what I mean.
Okay, so let's talk about the money a bit more then. So having failed to track down Cooper physically, the FBI turned to their other lead, which was the ransom money. As I said before, the money was taken from the ransom package of Seattle First National Bank, and so the serial number of every single note was documented. The list was first distributed to law enforcement, financial institutions, and other businesses which conducted significant cash transactions, and then given out to the general public a few months later. Several companies and newspapers also offered cash rewards for any ransom bills returned. The intent was to track down the transaction history of such bills in order to lead authorities to the hijacker. So if a bill turns up, you can say, I got it from this shop got it from this bank got it from this guy. Yeah.
That is a thing, isn't it? Because you look at every note and they have a serial number. That's genius. So they would have recorded the serial numbers of every note, right?
Yeah, there's a list. You can probably find it yourself online somewhere. There's a list of every single...
because they would have had a ransom bag pre-checked for the serial numbers, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's really clever.
I think the other thing as well is, I don't know when the technology came in, but now, like, if you try and rob a bank, the money is...
I'll pass.
No, but like the money, the money is filled with like dye bombs, isn't it? So when you're trying to open it, the dye goes everywhere and it ruins the money. I presume there was nothing like that in play here, Alex.
I didn't find any mention of something like that.
No. Okay, fine. So presumably it's cash that is spendable in small amounts, but you couldn't buy a house with that cash or a car, is what we're trying to say, isn't it?
Exactly. Okay, so none of the ransom bills were recovered until 1980, when the boy called Brian Ingram, playing on the bank of a river some 30 kilometres from the original search zone, unearthed 3 bundles of cash totaling $5,880.
Oof.
Having heard of the hijacking, Ingram's parents brought the money to the FBI, who confirmed that the cash was from Cooper's ransom, slightly disintegrated but still tied in rubber bands exactly how they were given to Cooper. So how did the 3 separate bundles of money end up buried next to each other on Tina Bar, which was the name of the sort of beach area? The first explanation is that some of the money was dropped into the Lewis River, which flowed into the larger Columbia River and washed them ashore. However, the problem with this is that the Columbia River flows in the opposite direction, so the bundles would have had to have been transported upstream. In order for the bundles to have been carried by the Columbia then, the cash would have had to have been dropped in the Washougal River, further to the southeast from the assumed landing zone. Alternatively, if the flight path was further west than the pilot said, the cash could have landed directly on Tina Bar. So the assumption is that the cash has fallen from him as he's parachuting in some way, and it ended up buried on this beach.
And when we say buried, is this kid like making a sandcastle and has stumbled across this money, or because it's like, what do you say? Is it 9 years later?
It's 9 years later. I'm not sure the exact depth, but I think it's pretty deep. Like a kid digging, like it would be like a couple-hour job, I reckon.
Oh, he stumbled across it. That's so weird, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he was just like on holiday, I guess, with his family, digging on the sand.
True, but you think 9 years worth of wind-blowing sand around a beach? Is it a beach? Was it a beach? Sorry, I just made that bit up.
It's described as a bar, which I guess is like
a sandbar.
It's like a really big riverbank, so it kind of looks like a beach.
Yeah. Okay.
You're the geologist.
I'm not a geographer.
Damn it, he's got you there.
Yeah, fuck.
You dare call me a geographer? Those nerds.
Rocks are so much better.
So the big issue with these natural explanations is that they don't explain how 3 independent bundles of cash ended up buried in the same location. The most probable explanation, therefore, is that a person or animal buried the money on the riverbank. So these are literally like, if you picture a pile of cash tied in a rubber band, it's 3 of those separately. And they're all like within a metre or so of each other buried.
Yeah, so they must have been buried.
Yeah, you mean considerably deep, right?
I mean
Deliberately buried, yeah, intentionally buried.
Deliberately, yeah. That's what I'm going for. Because if they were dropped on like a river or anything like that, the chances of them washing up, tightly packed or whatever.
Yeah, it's very unlikely.
Yeah,
I can see them being buried by a river, but not in the same spot.
No, fair enough.
So researchers have estimated that the money must have been buried within a year of the hijacking, because an experiment conducted in 2009 showed that the specific brand of rubber bands holding the money together couldn't withstand exposure to water or the air for more than a year. However, we've got breaking news. Research published in Nature literally a few weeks ago disputes that the money fell into the river immediately after the hijacking. Examining diatoms, or small deposits of algae present on the bills, showed that the money had not been submerged in the water until several months after the hijacking. This is because the specific diatoms found on the cash were a spring species, suggesting that the money was safely stored somewhere dry for months after the landing. The money was not floating in the water for a year, otherwise we would have seen diatoms from the full range of the year. We only saw them from the springtime bloom, so this puts a very narrow range on when the money got wet and was subsequently buried on Tina Bar. So that's brand new information I've got for you there.
So, did they manage to find the treasure map with the X mark on Tina Bar? Yeah.
Unfortunately,
that's exactly what this sounds like.
Well, I don't think Sky Pirates do treasure maps.
Oh, that's true. With all our experience of Sky Pirates.
Yeah, I am highly versed in the field of aerial piracy.
So I presume, Alex, since 1971, they have dug up the beach and looked for any other banknotes or anything in the local vicinity.
They have, since the 80s, they've scoured the area, both around Tina Bar and the Washougal River, which is upstream, and they haven't found any evidence of D.B. Cooper or the remaining money.
Right.
So this money is a bit of a mystery in itself, because that's kind of where it ends. Like, the kid found the money, it was from the ransom. He got to keep some of it after they did some forensics on it. And he then auctioned the money and made some more money because it was like wrecked, so he couldn't use it.
Yeah, but that's definitely a collector's
trading
item
money
then.
for money.
Trading disintegrated money for useful money. So, something we haven't talked about so far is, did D.B. Cooper actually survive the jump? So, many FBI agents are of the opinion that he didn't, but his remains were never found and no missing persons report matching his description has ever been filed.
Okay, so no missing person. So even if it was a fake name, there's just nobody giving the description of him has ever been filed.
That looked like the composite sketches they made.
So this guy's literally potentially using a fake name, but could be his real name, who no one's missing, who's vanished.
Yes. Now, bearing in mind these composites are pretty generic, so it's a bit of a stretch to say that no one matching a description has ever been said is missing, but it is what it is.
And we are confirming, just to double check again, that none of the notes are found apart from what the boy found. So none of them were spent. They either went into circulation and never got found, or just whatever.
Yeah, they've either never been found or never been spent.
Yes, okay.
So parts of the hijacking make him seem inexperienced, whereas other parts seem meticulously thought out. When Cooper left from the 727, the plane was travelling at over 300 kilometers per hour, and it was 10,000 foot from the ground. It was pitch black and raining heavily. It's a matter of debate whether this jump was suicidal or not, and as someone who's deathly afraid of heights, I have no idea whether that was... It doesn't seem safe to me.
I didn't even want to think about it. No, but like 10,000 foot, as far as I know, is really, really low for a parachute jump.
Okay, it's news to me, I have no idea.
It's like 3 kilometers, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
No, 10 kilometers. No, it's not. Wait, no, it's not feet, not meters. I'll cut that out, it's fine.
Yeah. It's... No, you're leaving that in.
Damn it.
You're leaving that in, yeah.
I don't know. Let's Google it. Because, to my knowledge, that is really low. And if you're doing a parachute jump, I thought they travel slower, so it's safer when you jump out of the plane and you're not hit by like the, if you imagine jumping out of a moving car, but there's a wall of concrete, because you'll be traveling that fast that the air hits you with such force. That's the way I'm imagining it anyway. But I'm not a physicist, as we've discussed a few times on the show. Yeah, the 10,000 foot, because you've got such little time to react. What if the ground's not perfectly 10,000 foot and then the sea level right below? Like, what did the flight path go over? Because if it was mountainous and the mountains are 15,000 foot above,
I mean, the plane would have crashed.
The plane would have crashed by then. But my point is being made. But if it was 9,000, if the ground level was 9,000 foot above sea level, that's only 1,000 foot above. I'm presuming that obviously it wouldn't be anything like that, because the pilot who was flying the plane still wouldn't have let it get to that point. Obviously. So maybe it is 10,000 foot above ground. Does it specify that?
It does say 10,000 foot above ground, where I've looked, but the area was pretty mountainous, because it's like around that Mount St. Helens sort of area.
Mm-hmm. The other side of it is maybe he thought that anyone investigating it wouldn't think that he'd jump out by there. So he's done it as, like you said, stupid. But what if he is experienced? What if he's been in the army and part of the paras? So he's used to parachuting and skydiving and stuff like that. So what if he's experienced enough to know, even in the pitch black in the rain, which just in itself sounds dangerous. But
okay, so to show that he wasn't experienced with parachuting, He was definitely not dressed for the occasion. He was wearing a black suit, trench coat, and loafers.
Yeah, but what if he's that good he could skydive?
Yeah, maybe.
That to me doesn't prove the point, because why would he get on with parachuting gear?
No, we could have had it in a bag.
That would have been searched.
It wouldn't have been searched. That's the point.
All right.
I just love the idea of, wait a minute, that man's got parachuting gear, completely ignoring the sticks of dynamite that he's got in his briefcase.
My brain completely glanced over that. No, but I think that's still, like, I don't see that as concrete evidence that he didn't know what he was doing, because he might just be confident enough. He might not have known that it would have been pitch black and raining. So when you're saying, like, oh, he wasn't dressed for the occasion, in terms of, like, the rain, no. I don't know what specific gear you'd need for parachuting, but, like, if you just turned up in, like, shorts and a t-shirt on holiday, they'd give you some, like, I don't know, I've seen people skydiving in a t-shirt and shorts. Not in a suit, admittedly, but...
I mean, I think the other thing to consider is we're making the assumption that he planned to jump when he did. What happens if he didn't plan to jump when he did? What happens if he actually did want to land in Mexico City the whole time and then panicked because something happened, or was because he was trapped on the plane with just his own thoughts going through his head, kind of just panic and jump out the back of the plane completely unplanned in his loafers and didn't really think about what was happening? That would make the chances of him dying much more significant, would make the chance of an unplanned jump causing a big spread of money and therefore potentially some money bundles to fall in a similar locale. And also whether or not this guy could have just fallen into the bottom of this lake and just hit the sea. And parachute was never found. Like, did he just hit the water? Sorry, hit the lake, not the sea. Just hit the water and die. Because, like, 10,000 feet, hitting water from a few meters when you belly flops, like hitting concrete, isn't it? So 10,000 feet, he probably would have exploded. The bomb probably would have exploded, and then you'd never have found him. There you go.
It would have been easier to find him, though, if you saw an explosion.
Yeah, but you might not have seen an explosion because thunder from the storm.
Ah, right, okay. Sure.
There you go. Flawless argument. Case closed.
I will say, though, that he did specifically ask for parachutes in his demands. So it does seem like...
In his initial demands, yeah.
He did plan to jump out.
But that also could have been for emergency as well, though. He did ask for parachutes, but... Oh, no, he asked for specific parachutes as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, he asked for those civilian ones, didn't they, that wouldn't auto-deploy. So that makes you think that if he doesn't want it to auto-deploy, he wants to be deploying his parachute significantly lower than you would want as a planned exercise, which might lend kudos to him being very experienced and thinking that when he's really low, he's going to deploy the parachute because he knows exactly what he's doing. But also could just be that he didn't want it to be traceable, or didn't want them to put anything weird in the parachute. I don't know whether or not, obviously, he checked the parachutes, and I don't know whether or not they had tracking devices then. But you'd be a little worried about it being bugged, wouldn't you, if you were given a military parachute?
My interpretation of him taking the civilian one instead was that maybe he's had training only on the civilian one, so he's not used to the military ones.
Great argument. Yeah, that is true. He might just be used to it, mightn't he? Yeah, it might be the familiarity that he's relying on in that pressure setting.
Okay, so although Cooper appeared to be familiar with parachutes, the FBI came to the conclusion that he lacked crucial skydiving skills. In the haste of acquiring the full parachutes for Cooper, the police had unintentionally provided him with a training parachute which was sewn shut, and it was this parachute that he picked as his reserve. He also failed to bring or request a helmet, and chose to jump with the older and technically inferior of the two primary parachutes. This choice could be interpreted differently, however, as the parachute he chose to use was a military parachute, which he may have had more experience with. So even though he asked for civilian parachutes, they did provide him with one military and one of the others, and he picked the military one, which was technically worse than the other one, and the reserve chute he picked was a dummy chute, basically. It was a training one, which wouldn't work.
And I presume the one that he cut open and cut apart was a real parachute?
The one he cut open was a real parachute, but if you go with the assumption that he also cut the other reserve parachute up to make a bag, it wouldn't matter that it's a training parachute, because he never planned to use it anyway. So there's arguments on both sides whether or not he knew what he was doing with these parachutes. Even if he did land safely, however, agents concluded that survival in the wilderness would have been almost impossible without an accomplice at a predetermined landing spot. This would have been impossible, however, because Cooper never specified the flight path and the parachute he used couldn't be steered.
Okay, right, so that throws everything else we said before out the window.
It does.
Yeah, so he probably did die then.
Well, not necessarily that he died in the way. Well,
what if he's going literally straight towards a tree, like George of the Jungle? Like he's just.
Well, then you're not that far from the ground.
No, I think what Sean means is that your chances of a successful landing and being alive on arrival to terra firma is very low because you've got everything. You've got the sky. You might be hit by a bird mid-flight. Someone might be clay pigeon shooting and shoot you at the sky.
At 8 o'clock in the
on a rainy day.
In the wilderness in Washington.
Yeah, but particularly challenging clay pigeon shooting, I might add. But I
mean, it's a bigger target. Bigger than a clay pigeon.
Well, no, what I mean.
Sean, you've got clay pigeon shooting. How would you feel about shooting someone out the sky on a rainy day?
Easy money.
Okay, there you go.
In this case, pun intended.
Yeah, especially if it was a sky pirate and he'd insulted you.
Yeah.
And he swashbuckled past you on his parachute.
I'll show them Sky Pirates. No, what we're saying is he's jumped out the plane and he's activated the parachute. What's it called?
Deployed.
Jesus Christ.
Activate.
Activated the parachute.
Oh shit! I activated the bomb.
He's just gliding down. You can't steer it.
The wrong ripcord.
Sorry, Sean.
Yeah, activated the parachute, deployed the bomb. So he's deployed the parachute, he's gliding down, he can't control it, and then in the dark, he can't see what he's doing. Literally, what if he's landed in a tree? Whether that's the impact that hurts, but the parachutes don't slow your fall, especially if you can't control it and steer it.
I mean, they do slow your fall. That is the purpose.
Yeah, but not enough to. You still have to know what you're doing to land. You have to, if you've seen a parachute landed, it's still like you've got to have your legs prepared for it. If he can't see the ground, it's just going to break his legs. And what I'm saying about the tree thing, if he can't see or steer either one, it's straight away he's just going to hit a tree, be impaled by branches.
But you think at some point somebody would have then found a body attached to a parachute, and that would have been reported?
If it's such a large, like you said, he's jumped out an relatively indiscernible point, 10,000 foot above ground, could have travelled in any direction. That's a huge, he probably would have just plummeted 1,000 foot before he managed to get the parachute out, before it probably started, slowed him down or whatever. But maybe even more than that, which is why, because I'm sure it's a couple of 1,000 foot before you stabilise and you whatever. But
I just theoretically you're decelerating from the moment that you deploy your parachute, aren't you? So
yeah, but you're also accelerating from the point you jump out of the plane.
Yeah. So until you achieve terminal velocity, you're accelerating, like you're saying. As soon as you deploy your parachute, you're suddenly decelerating. So I suppose there's always the chance that when he deployed his parachute, there was a parachute failure, which meant that he could have fallen, especially if he had a less familiar parachute. But I suppose if he did he then choose the military one to increase his likelihood of a successful landing now? I'm not sure. I don't know enough about parachuting.
Yeah, I was going to say, the three of us again are debating a topic which we are experts on.
Damn right. You mean sky pirating, right? Not the parachute bit.
No, I'm an internet pirate. Different.
Oh. Fair enough.
The thing that's getting me, just before we move on, is the point that he left the plane. I know it was dark and it was night, but if they had the jets literally watching like a hawk or whatever, but were they on side by side?
I picture them being behind the plane quite a ways.
Exactly. So how? Surely they would have seen.
I mean, would you see a tiny speck of a man coming out of a plane in the darkness? There might be a lot of cloud cover as well.
Right, fighter pilots are highly trained. Right, it's possible completely, but I'm just thinking it's a high.
Well, Sean, you can't argue that he's still on the plane to this day.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, how did they miss it?
I don't know, because they just did.
Because I'm arguing my counterpoint and my point, because yeah, it's completely possible they would have missed it, but also I feel like in that sort of situation it's quite tense. You know, you're flying a plane. Is it like driving a car? Like sometimes do you lose a little bit of concentration or something?
I imagine there's, yeah.
And like it shouldn't
especially
be.
If you're flying in a straight line, like what are you going to hit? There's nothing to hit.
What, a guy jumping out of a plane in the parachute? You hit that?
Well, it's a pirate, so who cares if you hit him? You'd take his place as the true American hero if you killed the sky pirate.
I love that, like, and here is the Medal of Honor.
I'm just imagining it like GTA or something. Like PvP, just run someone over with a hydra.
Okay, so
anyway.
To support Cooper surviving, however, other hijackers have performed similar jumps and safely made it to the ground. So there was a lot of copycats after this.
At the same copycats as in
hijacking
hijackers.
Planes and jumping out of them to escape.
Right, at the same location at the same time of day?
You'd have to look at specifics because there's a lot of them.
Right.
Yeah, the thing is, copycats tend to do things based on like admiration, don't they? So it'd be quite a ridiculous feat to assume that this guy has survived, and therefore a copycat would make sense. But are we talking at the same time with the same gear, with the same jumping out the same style of plane at the same height? Like, the chances of that are probably pretty slim, right?
Okay, so in a bit we will get to one of the copycats, and it's basically the exact same hijacking, and he survives and gets away for a little bit. But I don't want to spoil it too much.
I mean, you have spoiled it.
Yeah, I know, but...
Don't want to spoil it, but it's literally exactly the same thing.
Yeah, don't mean to spoil it, but it's a carbon copy.
Yeah.
It's DB Cooper Part 2.
Yeah.
It's actually just
the
DB
Cooper
Cooper
ring.
again, dude.
The Cooper ring.
The recoupering a little bit. It's just DB Cooper there, like middle fingers up in the air as he's parachuting out.
And then the third one was DB Cooper Part 3. We have to recoup.
Oh my god.
Oh.
Okay, so let's assume that Cooper got away with his aerial piracy. So who could he be? One of the first suspects in the case was an Oregon man with a minor police record named DB Cooper. He was quickly eliminated as a suspect, but due to a press mix-up, the original alias of Dan Cooper was replaced by DB Cooper, and this is where we get the name of the case.
Ah, so he isn't actually DB Cooper?
No, he is Dan Cooper. But this guy was DB Cooper, and he was completely innocent, probably. Cooper appeared to be familiar with the Seattle area and may have been an Air Force veteran, based on testimony that he recognised both the city of Tacoma and the nearby Air Force Base as the plane circled Seattle. So the flight attendants just sort of said that he offhandedly mentioned that this is Tacoma and there's the McCord Air Force Base where the jet pilots came from and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators have theorised that he took his alias from the 70s comic book series Dan Cooper, which features a Canadian pilot. The comic was written in French and was available in Canada, therefore Cooper may have been a bilingual Canadian. This is also supported by his use of the phrase negotiable American currency, something that an American citizen would likely not say.
Yeah, there's two sides I was thinking to that. So it could be, like you said, but then also he could just be specific.
Yeah, he could just be
like, what if he turned around and said, I want $250 and they give him 250,000 Monopoly money?
Yeah.
Which they wouldn't, I'd like to think they wouldn't do, but I'd like to think they wouldn't have given him fake money or unusable money. They would have just known, right, okay, give him dollars. But he might have been he must have had it rehearsed. And the amount of times he would have had it rehearsed, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's gone over it like, what if they give me Monopoly money? So there's both sides of it, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of actual suspects, I've picked 5, which seem quite likely. So are you ready for this? Here we go.
Yep.
First one I've got is William Gossett. He was a veteran of the Korean and Vietnam Wars, whose military experience included advanced jump training and wilderness survival. He was widely known to be a Cooper fanboy and owned a vast collection of Cooper-related news articles. Late in his life, he reportedly told 3 of his sons, a friend of his and a retired Utah judge, that he had committed the hijacking. He apparently once showed his sons a key to a Vancouver safe deposit box, which he claimed contained the ransom money, and his oldest son said that his father, a compulsive gambler who was always strapped for cash, showed him wads of cash just before Christmas in 1971. This was just weeks after the Cooper hijacking. He speculated that Gossett gambled the money away in Las Vegas. In 1988, Gossett changed his name to Wolfgang and became a Roman Catholic priest, which others have interpreted as an effort to disguise his identity.
Wow, that took a complete
turn.
Then. I was just like, what, he became a what? Oh, okay.
He became the Wolfgang.
So he tried to repent for his sins.
He did, by choosing a very cool name.
Yeah.
Suspect 2 is the now woman Barbara Dayton, who underwent gender reassignment surgery in 1969 and changed her name from Robert. She was a recreational pilot who served in the US Army during World War II. After discharge, Dayton worked with explosives in the construction industry and aspired for a professional airline career, but could not obtain a commercial pilot's license. She claims to have staged the hijacking by disguising herself as a man and then escaping scrutiny afterwards as a woman. Dayton says that the ransom money was hidden in a cistern near Woodburn, Oregon, but later recanted the story, most likely because she realised that she could still be arrested for it.
Oh, I just love the idea of, it was definitely me. Psych.
Yep. So that there's a
This is still a live case. Fuck.
There's a who was the woman in Jack the Ripper? Jill the Ripper. There's a Jill the Ripper suspect for you.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like a bit of a curveball, like the opposite gender to what we think. But it's quite likely that someone currently undergoing gender reassignment surgery could be mistaken as a man.
Yeah. I mean, they were previously, so...
Okay, so the third suspect is Robert Rackstraw. He came to the attention of the Cooper Task Force in 1978 after being arrested in Iran and deported to the US on charges of explosives possession and check fraud. He was an Army veteran, paratrooper and retired helicopter pilot. Pirate? Yeah, he was a helicopter pirate.
Oh my god, that's so
It gets cooler, doesn't it?
Even better.
He was a retired helicopter pilot, being discharged from the Army just 5 months before the hijacking took place. On the other hand, Rackstraw was only 28 in 1971, which is a big difference from the supposed mid-40s of the hijacker, and one of the flight attendants reportedly did not find any similarities between photos of Rackstraw from the 1970s and her recollection of Cooper's appearance. So he kind of fits the bill in terms of military background and training, and he's a criminal. But he doesn't seem to look...
Yeah, he just doesn't have the characteristics.
Yeah, he doesn't look like Cooper. So the fourth one, which I mentioned before, is Richard McCoy. He was a Vietnam veteran who was a demolitions expert, helicopter pilot, and avid recreational skydiver. He became a suspect in 1972 when he hijacked a Boeing 727 and parachuted from the rear stairway. Brandishing what later proved to be a paperweight resembling a hand grenade and an unloaded handgun, he demanded 4 parachutes and $500,000. After delivery of the money and parachute at San Francisco International Airport, McCoy ordered the aircraft back into the sky and bailed out over Provo, Utah, leaving behind his handwritten hijacking instructions and his fingerprints on a magazine he had been reading. I did check, but I wasn't able to find if his handwriting matched DB Cooper's. But we only had that one small sample from Cooper. McCoy survived the fall and was arrested 2 days later with the ransom cash still in his possession. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, but managed to escape before being killed in a shootout with FBI agents. The FBI doesn't consider him a suspect because of the mismatches in physical description and age, since he was 29 in 1971. He was also an experienced skydiver, specifying a flight path and bringing a helmet and jumpsuit, which these things that DB Cooper didn't do. But I personally see these details as him learning from his mistakes.
I was just about to say that, yeah. It's like take 1 didn't go as quite as planned. Take 2 goes better.
It doesn't.
But that's...
It goes worse.
You've got to have a bit of bollocks to do that anyway, in the first place, but to have bollocks to do it twice.
So the final guy I've got for you is Walter R. Recker. He was a military veteran and member of the Michigan parachute team, which is apparently a thing, and he was proposed as a suspect by his friend Carl Laurin in 2018. In 2008, Recker confessed to Laurin that he was DB Cooper. Recker gave Laurin permission to record their phone conversations about the crime over a 6-week period in 2008, and he also allowed Laurin to share his story after his death, which happened in 2014. In the 3+ hours of recordings, Recker gave new details about the hijacking that the public had not heard before. He describes how he landed in a town but didn't know where he was. He entered a cafe, sat next to a man named Jeff Oshadak, and asked him if he'd be able to give his friend directions if he called him on the phone. Oshadak agreed and gave the supposed getaway driver directions to the cafe in Clay Ulm, Washington. In 2012, Laurin tracked down Oshadak and showed them a photo of Wrecker, who confirmed his identity. So Lauren managed to track down the guy, basically from Wrecker's description of him and his description of the area. He didn't know it was actually in Cle-Elum in Washington. Did a bit of a sleuth. So they're all 5 of the suspects I've got. Who is your guy? If you think he survived.
So just going through them again. So you mentioned very specifically on number 3 that when they asked the flight attendants, the physical description didn't match up because he was too young, and mentioned the same thing about 4. So for 1 and 2, obviously 2 being we said she'd gone.
2 was the gender reassignment.
But that happened. That happened before, hadn't it?
It started in 1969, but it's a lengthy process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did the description of the transgender person match what the
I don't think
thought?
They've asked the flight attendants about this specific suspect.
Okay, what about number 1?
I haven't seen anything about that either.
Okay, fine.
The number 1 is mostly circumstantial evidence about his family members saying that he said he was D.B. Cooper and he had a lockbox with the money in it, and he magically came across a load of money in 1971, even though he was a gambler.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose going through them one by one. So you got number 1 is potentially fits the story from an age perspective. Could have gambled the money away. Could have lost it all. Maybe in several smaller bets. That's why the money was never traced. Because I presume if he'd gone to Vegas and bet it, when you cash in your money for chips, the serial numbers are presumably checked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't.
They must have more security measures in that respect than most places.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to take fake money, do they? So
no. So perhaps he frittered it away doing low-level gambling.
Yeah, maybe. Well, the other side to that as well, with his family members making testaments saying that he was obsessed with D.B. Cooper. Like, he could be obsessed with him because he was him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That obsession could have been misinterpreted as an obsession, and it could have actually just been
him basking in the glory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously saying that he was found with loads of money. It could be that he had a big win if he was a gambler.
Yeah, could be.
So then number 2, we were saying, so the physical description then presumably would have involved this person's characteristics changing fairly quickly to escape as a female. So you wonder whether or not they've then put... So I'm making the assumption that they've put a wig on and become female in the aftermath. I mean, so that they've got that short-haired look
I think so.
at the time of the crime.
Yeah, at the time of the crime, no one would have been looking for a woman. It's perfect.
Which makes it really hard to dispute, because actually...
anyone can make themselves look more masculine or more feminine. Feminine. Anyone can make themselves look more masculine or feminine. Fuck's sake.
This episode's one has arrived.
It's leisure. No, with a wig, with makeup, with just clothing as well, especially for 1970s. Like,
yeah, you think a really smart suit,
gender reassignment and all that. Like, from the society perspective, like, the awareness and everything wasn't really there.
Yeah.
You'd think as well, particularly with the clothing point of view, with a really smart suit, you'd almost assume it was a male wearing a suit, I presume then.
Right, okay, hang on. So she went from man to female?
Yes.
Male to female, right, perfect. Because physically it would have been a man in a suit. Like, initial impressions, I think it would be easy to hide the fact that she'd been transitioning. If that makes sense. With with a suit, with not even a wig, just cutting her hair, and then with makeup and everything, it would make sense that she'd go back to her normal life.
Yeah, but I will say
and no one would know a thing.
That the flight attendants were very close proximity with her on the plane. So if there was any chance that it was a woman, they would have noticed.
So this is limited knowledge on my part in terms of gender reassignment.
Oh yeah, it always is. On every topic we do, it's limited knowledge.
I don't know.
It depends on the person, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 3. Sorry, Alex, just remind me which one number 3 is.
It was the guy who was arrested in Iran. He was deported back to the US on explosive possession charges. He'd just been discharged from the army 5 months before the hijacking took place, and I don't think it was like a amicable discharge, it was like a fire-in, I guess. So he fits the skills, sort of, ticks the skills box.
Yeah.
But he was a little young, based on a description of Cooper.
So I suppose the things about him, so you probably could make yourself look a little older as well. If we're talking about sort of trying to disguise your character.
Yeah, and
you make yourself look older, you could make yourself
age is always iffy. Like, you guys know me, I look very young for my age. So...
Yeah, that's true.
I look very old for my age.
Yeah, so, like...
I'm probably somewhere in the middle.
It's often very hard to estimate how old someone is just by a quick glance at them. I guess they weren't, like, staring them in the eye while you sat there with a bomb next to them.
No.
But
like you said, the amount of time spent in close proximity...
Yeah.
You'd think would make you have certain things that would be memorable. Like, you wonder whether or not this guy could have been... I don't know, something as simple as lots of forehead wrinkles or crow's feet or saggy skin on his neck or like things that you kind of see as people get older that are natural aging things. Whether or not he could have had those and maybe have had a bit more of a rough life if he's served in the military. Because you just think anybody going to war, that might age you significantly despite your physical age. So it might well be that this guy looks like he's older than he actually is. But he's got a bit more of an up-to-date skill set for why he might be more daring with the jump.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of things we were talking about with the parachute and the low altitude and things like that.
I will say that the picture I saw of him online, I'm assuming is his mugshot from 78 when he was arrested, and he's got kind of a baby face sort of vibe to him. Like, I would say he was in his 20s.
It could also be the way that he's carried himself as well.
Yeah, could be.
Like, maturity comes into it quite a bit. I think it's a bit of a stretch with number 3.
Okay.
I think the physical description wouldn't be that far off. I don't know. This one doesn't... I don't feel that convinced about number 3.
Yeah, number 4 was the copycat, the supposed copycat, who basically did the exact same crime again, but better.
Yeah, again, learning from his mistakes or learning from D.B. Cooper's mistakes, though.
And then the 5th guy was the guy who confessed in 2008, and there's like 3 hours of recordings of him talking about it, which you could probably
find.
Does the
recordings
online.
Match up? Yeah, from what you read about him, did the recordings match up with a possible chain of events, or is it literally like a... Because you said he'd given some new details, didn't you?
Yeah, the new details I think were mostly about how after he landed, and he talked to this guy in the cafe. I will say that I haven't listened to the recordings of them, mostly because I did this last night, at last minute.
Yeah.
We are usually very prepared and professional with this podcast, but...
Sean's not on his phone.
There isn't a reason I don't have my normal microphone, which, if anyone who is a regular listener, if you do notice a difference, that's why. So we had to make do.
So the details about this guy that he gives are around about the descriptions to the cafe, aren't they?
Yeah, I believe in the recordings, though, like he recounts the hijacking pretty perfectly to the details that the FBI have. Again, this was in 2008, though, so it was like out in public knowledge.
Does he tell of who his conspirator is?
I don't think so.
Because if for his story to be likely, he needs to be able to... Obviously, the bit about him asking for descriptions from some guy in a cafe all rely on nobody ever thinking about that. Like, why did that not flag up at the time? Like a random person coming into a cafe asking for directions whilst holding a bag full of money and a briefcase with a bomb on it, and loafers that were going to be soaking wet if he just parachuted in.
Yeah, he did describe him as a drowned rat when he walked into the cafe. I did say that they tracked down the Oshadutz guy, and he did confirm the story. But again, he might be being paid. There is a documentary on Amazon Prime about this suspect, and Oshadutz is in it. So there's a money motive, I guess, there. But he does basically recount the story exactly how Wrecker describes it.
Yeah, but the issue with that is, again, that you've told us as much information that he might know.
Exactly. It's always
better.
I will say that I think 4 is my guy, the copycat. and I think that he's just gotten better at it.
Again, though, it takes bollocks to do it twice.
It does, but I mean,
if you already committed, and then how much did he ask for the second time?
A lot more, 500,000.
500.
I was going to say, well, even that, like, if you're doing it properly, take $1 million. Take a solid round million.
Like Dr. Evil. $1 million.
$1 billion.
Wait, that's not very much money.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, it may be that you have to think about it from a practical point of view. Asking for $1 million is a huge amount of money
it's carrying it.
in bills. You've got to get it out of the plane.
Mm-hmm. He did manage with 500,000 this time.
Yeah, but he could just ask for it in like $50 bills or $100 bills this time.
Yeah, but then it's harder to spend and more traceable, isn't it? The whole point of that being small bills is the fact that it's less traceable.
Well, there's an argument to say that if he's doing it, well, okay, so I'm pushing a point that doesn't really matter. But if he did go for $100 bills, it would be easier to get out. But then he'd be able to fence it if he had the contacts. I played Skyrim,
but then they could track down the money to the fencer.
Yeah. But they could at least like launder it. I know what you mean, because they're not, like you said, they're not going to check tiny, just going to the shop and buying some food. They wouldn't check the serial numbers for that. Yeah.
Just remind me, Alex. Sorry, when did it happen? Second run.
In 72, so the year after.
Because that's quite close. I was just pondering on your thought there, Sean. You saying that kind of trying to launder it. You think the same thing happening again? It's almost like tried and tested, isn't it? But he has gone for more money. So it's like, oh yeah, it makes you think it was easy to get 250. I should have done 500.
Maybe, yeah. But then also, because 250 sounds like a realistic amount of money for the government to just hand over.
Oh, definitely. What if
he knew that they had ransom money ready? Like if he's planned it,
a lot of banks.
I think
it's like a common thing.
I think it's a common thing for banks to be able to have cash that they can forfeit that's insured to counteract the loss of life or harm.
And it's traceable.
Yeah. The thing I like about number 4, and I'm mostly in agreement about number 4 being it, is the tried and tested thing you just can't shrug off. Mm-hmm. It does sound like very much like it worked. This person's done it once. They can do it again. They have that almost swagger of arrogance about being like, you didn't catch me the first time. You're not going to catch me the second time.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's gone wrong and they've caught him. But it makes you think that it's just a bit cocky.
Mm-hmm. And this time I'll bring a jumpsuit because I got fucking soaked last time and it was miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's probably easier to discard a jumpsuit and walk into somewhere dry.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
To not arouse suspicion. And then if there's no suspicion that's been roused, then it doesn't matter where you hid the jumpsuit, because the jumpsuit's going to be discarded as a jumpsuit. No one's going to think, oh, this definitely ties to a crime that links to that dodgy person that walked into that cafe.
And even if they do find it, then they can't do much with it. Get some prints off it, maybe, but...
Yeah, maybe. I think I like the number 3.
You like Rackstraw?
Yeah.
The one who doesn't fit the description.
Yeah. I think just the character, in terms of his past, his recency of a military discharge, which sounds dishonourable. If it was a dishonourable discharge, you lose your pension and things. So this guy might have been desperate for money. The whole scenario to be able to get 250 grand, it probably is essentially his retirement money. Like, it works for me on some levels. Admittedly, not all of them. I will give you that. The physical description might not match up, but it's easy to think, oh yeah, it's definitely 4 because it's done it once, done it again, and then they caught him.
Yep.
But to play devil's advocate, I think I like 3.
Yeah, I will say that they did many different composite sketches though from descriptions, and a lot of them are quite different.
Mm-hmm.
So descriptions are a bit dodgy, especially in people who are under stress, like there's a bomb next to me.
Yeah, weapon focus.
I've got a feeling Sean's going to say Jill the Ripper again. Miss Barbara Dayton.
Yeah, actually, because it could be any of them. That one to me is the most interesting, and I feel like it would be like it's out of the box, outside the box sort of thing. Like, it's genius. Like, it would be easy to pull off. I'm not like glorifying the crime or anything, but we're a podcast. We need to talk about these sort of things.
I have called him a true American hero twice.
Tongue in cheek, of course. No, but like that to me is the most interesting. It's the one that stands out the most to me.
You like the story?
If I have to pick one, 2 is interesting. 1 to me is the one that stood out.
Okay.
As like probably the most likely, but 2 is the one that is the most interesting. Interesting is the word I'm going to go for because I keep trying to think of a different word. But interesting. It's the most interesting.
It's interesting.
Very interesting.
It's interesting. About as interesting as me, but 1 is the most. It fits the most things in my head that he's got like this confused. People are confused is what's the word? Not the addiction, like the interest. Infatuation with DB Cooper and the story,
his fanboyism.
Fanboyism, there you go. So he and then like all the things that his family turn around that they would have noticed potentially if he hasn't hid it, thinking that he could trust his family or whatever, and gone, oh yeah, I've got this, and then joked about it and gone, I'm only kidding with you. But he wanted, because he's done
and
this
then runs off to the church.
Think about it. You've done this thing that you can't tell anyone about. Yes, okay, in this case, it is a very bad thing. He's hijacked a plane. But someone who's done that kind of thing, they might want to talk about it.
Yeah, and especially if you're keeping all these clippings, like, he seems very proud of the fact. He's like, it was fucking badass. I jumped out of this plane at 10,000 foot in a suit and a trench coat and loafers. And then I survived in the wilderness for 14 days. And I killed a wolf and wore its skin.
With my bare hands.
Yeah. And then I emerged from the forest a true man. And then 300 died.
Oh, I thought you were talking about The Revenant.
I could be The Revenant. I haven't seen The Revenant, but I was picturing 300 when he is a kid and gets left in the wilderness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my final thing. 1 is probably, in my head, the most realistic and probably the most accurate, but 2 is the interesting one, just because it does stand out. It's not just the generic, the other ones are just like basically army guy needs money, or army guy is aggrieved because of dishonorable discharge and stuff, which is still, just because it's not the most fantastical thing, it's still, whatever. But 2 is the one I like the most as a theory.
I find it interesting that you picked 1 over 5 when they're basically the same thing, except 5 has recordings. Again, you haven't seen the recordings, but
I don't know. Yeah. So 5 for me, one thing I forgot to say, it's probably the 1, but the thing that I can't get out of my head. No, not even that. Like, it's not boring. Yes, okay, it is the most boring because it's like, oh well, he just confessed in the end. But the other side of it is, like, we've mentioned it the last couple of podcasts, I think. So the Al Bielek one from
Philadelphia Experiment.
Thank you. It was my episode. He watched the film and then had this amazing recollection and like suppressed memories. And then the last one, John Titor, with what we were saying about the same sort of situation, like
where it was completely true.
Yeah. Because so he had all the information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but we're talking about that with, like, if someone's got that capacity to be able to just make stuff up on the spot and have, because he would have had time to think about the forums and how time travel worked, and he would have had, like, whatever. What if it's the same sort of thing? He's got all this information of how things happened. Okay, if he gave out information of what happened on the plane that they didn't release publicly, which would have been clever. If the FBI were clever, they should have done it.
Oh my god, they're coming for you now.
I'm not calling them out. I'm just saying, because you're not telling me I'm wrong. I'm just suggesting that might have been a good idea. And if they did do it, great. But hold back some information of what happened. Hold back some of the conversation that happened maybe between some of the staff. Don't release everything to the public. Did he recall everything verbatim, pretty much, to the FBI, and they went, okay, yeah, to be fair, he wouldn't have known about that.
Yeah, well, the case was closed in 2016, so they had to release all the information for it, I believe. So they haven't held anything back.
You'd think they'd... So this is 2016, sorry?
This is 2018, this refugee guy. It's very recent.
Right, okay. I thought you said 2008. Okay. So
no, the recordings are from 2008, but Lauren released them in 2018 after Wrecker died. because he said, I'll confess to you in these recordings, but you can only release them after I'm dead.
Okay.
He died in 2014,
so it took him 4 years. Because obviously he wanted to avoid prison.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
But
and
still...
Lauren did have these recordings for 10 years and never gave them to the FBI. But he was his friend, so he didn't want to throw him under the bus, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we're going over it again. I'm like...
Well, you're not allowed to change your mind.
I'm going to stick
already picked one.
I'm going to stick 1 and 2.
Okay, so I think we've got to the bottom of that. It's all of them.
So
the
case has been closed. Was it reopened and him confirmed? Or is it just widely accepted that it was
I don't think the FBI have commented yet on Wrecker specifically. They've closed the case, and I believe they said they will reopen it if they have any more significant findings in the case.
Oh, okay, so they said that after they received a confession?
No, before.
Right, okay.
They said that in 2016.
So they received a confession?
In 2018, but they've received a lot of confessions, I imagine.
Have they?
Yeah.
Probably.
Loads of people who want to lie and say that they were D.B. Cooper.
I suppose this one does stand out because it's like, oh, this guy's died. But also, is it possible that he did it just to literally be a dick? And go, yeah, okay, just release this when I die, it'll be funny.
Yeah, it could be. They've made...
Yeah,
I did say there's a documentary on Amazon Prime at the moment about it. They've made money. They released a book about it as well.
Like Carlos Miguel Allende from Philadelphia Experiment.
Indeed.
But he did actually work with Einstein.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
Well, I think Sean hit the nail on the head when he said this case was interesting several times over.
Yeah, I would like to say it was interesting.
That was really good.
I like these ones where we have a lineup at the end and we have to pick who we think is
the firing squad. Like.
we have to pick who to shoot. I don't know which one to shoot. It could be any of them.
Sean, stop picking the women. So that is a good point. Like, I'm going to change my answer from now on. If there's an option where it's a woman, like.
Okay, the rule from now on is you have to kill the suspect. Ramblings of a Madman is currently available on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify and YouTube. All the links are available on Twitter at Roam Podcast, that's ROAM Podcast. Thank you for listening and we'll see you next time.
Bye!